Now listen, goblins, and listen well. It might be thundering and lightning outside. I might be coming down with a cold. And there could be otherworldly forces trying to silence me from covering the fantasy news. But you see here, what they don't understand is the fantasy news must flow. Welcome everybody to another episode of one of the constants in the universe that will never ever cease to happen. I am your disheveled goblin host, Daniel Green, and today we have Smack It Late, a beautiful episode of fantasy news to jump on into, starting with exciting news from friend of the channel, Nicholas Eames, who has tweeted out, "You know that person who plays a paladin in D&D just so they can roleplay as an insufferable prick? Well, Michael Moresi and I wrote a barbaric spin-off about them called The Wrong Kind of Righteous, and it's coming from the Vault Comics in August." Nicholas, I really like that premise. I can't wait to see some paladins put in their place by some passionate barbarians. And thank you for shouting out your artist, Nathan Gooden. Following that up for an exciting cover reveal, we got a tweet from Orbit that says, "Love is sacrifice. One of us was always going to bleed for the other." We could not be more excited to reveal the cover of An Education in Malice, the new book from S.T. Gibson, the Sunday Times best-selling author of A Dowry of Blood. I kind of overcommitted to the dramatic read voice there, but you're here for overcommitment. Don't leave me. But finishing off the Orbit news, we also got a cover reveal for These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs, to be released October 17th, the first book in the Kingdom trilogy. A dangerous cat and mouse quest for revenge, an empire that spans star systems built on the bones of a genocide. A carefully hidden secret that could collapse worlds, hunted by three women with secrets of their own. All collide in this twisty, explosive space opera debut, perfect for readers of Arkady Martine and Cameron Hurley. But that's enough of the cover reveals. Let's go ahead and talk about some Tolkien news, because we have two pieces of it. And the first of which is that the Letters from Tolkien is getting an expanded edition. With the original Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien released in 1981, there was apparently a batch of letters not included in the original 354, just due to, say it with me, publishing restrictions. Well, this new edition is going to have those letters, due to how rights have evolved and changed, folded on into it. So if you're a fan of that batch of letters, which, as this article points out, is the closest we're ever going to really get of an autobiography of J.R.R. Tolkien, you can go ahead and pick up a new edition, which will give you possibly further insights into one of the greatest minds fiction has ever encountered. Oh, but you want to know how many additional letters? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, 100 is 150 apparently. I was going to go all the way there, but I ran out of breath. And it'll be released November of this year. But for those few viewers who pay close attention to the words that come out of my mouth, you will have heard me state that there are two Tolkien stories today, and that is true. Because we are also going to be talking about the fact that, remember a while ago how we covered that person who was launching a, in my opinion, fairly obvious fraudulent lawsuit about the Rings of Power, claiming they stole from his book, The Fellowship of the King? Full coverage here, but giving a brief recap of what happened. Essentially, the author of The Fellowship of the King is accusing Rings of Power from stealing from his story, which he has said is heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings, and apparently he tried very desperately to get it in the hands of people involved in the Tolkien estate, in my opinion, just so that they could have some form of basis of showing, see, my story has similarities and they've seen my story probably, so therefore I can sue. Another important note from this article, apparently the Tolkien estate did try and come to some form of agreement, saying, over several days in March and April, the estate attempted to schedule a call with Polychron to resolve the dispute. The filing said, but he continuously postponed and claimed to be bedridden due to a serious illness. Plaintiffs were therefore surprised to discover that on the same day defendant claimed to be physically incapable of correspondence, defendant had in fact filed a lawsuit in the district court against the Tolkien estate and others. Polychron's suit claimed that while his book was admittedly inspired by The Lord of the Rings, he had developed a wholly original book in concept, which the estate and Amazon then used for the 2020 TV series set in the same fantasy universe as the original trilogy. In their countersuit, the Tolkien estate is claiming that Fellowship of the King incorporates an astonishingly wide range of copyright-protected elements from Tolkien's canon. Among them are 15 poems and other passages apparently copied verbatim, and hundreds of original characters, and the recycling of the entire plot premise of the trilogy, allegedly. I'm not going to take the time to read the book, but it would be insane to claim all of this if they weren't there. An attorney for the author has not returned a request for comment. So this author is claiming the Tolkien estate, and of course also Amazon, stole his story to make a prequel show to Lord of the Rings, even though he is saying his book is original, though inspired by Tolkien, even though Rings of Power, despite yes changing somewhat from its source material, is clearly Tolkien material. So there's a whole lot of what? I just smell malarkey, and I don't really like any of the players on any of the sides here, so I'll continue to keep you up to date watching people legally slap each other in the face in an attempt to get money. Allegedly, in my opinion, allegedly. But before we move into the next story, not a word from today's sponsor, but just a word from me. But first, I am very excited to say that my upcoming book, Neon Ghosts, A Witch's Sin, is officially available for pre-order. So, if you would like to get an ebook or audiobook, day of release, 1 week into the Kickstarter for the hardback being live, you can get it following the links down below. To celebrate the fact that I am officially able to push all of you to go pre-order the book en masse and not just to sign up for the pre-launch of a Kickstarter, I thought it might be fun to give you a spoiler-free pitch for what exactly inspired me to write this book. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about what inspired Neon Ghosts, A Witch's Sin. For A Witch's Sin, I wanted to lay the groundwork to explore untreated trauma and the numbing days that can settle in as a result. A feeling that is, in my experience, only punctured by outbursts of uncontrolled emotion. Events and motivations begin to blur as actions become driven only by self-preservation, contradicted by compulsive risk-taking behaviors. Thoughts can turn into obsessions over odd, minute details, which can then spiral into something far more toxic, affecting both internal thoughts and external behaviors. This is the experience that inspired the protagonist of Neon Ghosts, Taya Mint, which, yes, is somewhat based off my own experiences, which relates to Taya Mint as she is someone who, like myself, lost someone close to them suddenly and unexpectedly. It was devastating, unfair, and there was nothing and no one to blame. No logical explanation beyond it being a part of the great experience that is life, an experience that brings both great joy and indescribable pain. Grief-stricken, lost, and searching for answers, Taya struggles to keep her personal life and work separate. But people who have dealt with untreated trauma know that when your heart is broken, your mind becomes restless. It's a nightmare just to exist within your own thoughts. And a desperate need for relief from that cycle can become irresistible. And in this brutal life filled with blood, guns, and cybernetic wear, Taya is left vulnerable. Behind the scenes, powerful players are raging a war against the supernatural for control of the megastructures, humanity's last refuge from the acidic green haze choking off the rest of the outside world. And yes, there's pretty overt symbolism within the book about descending in layers of trauma and physical representations of them, because I really was pulling at the idea of making motivations have that smear of trauma across them that make it oh so hard to make logical sense of actions, but I wanted there to be some form of direct communication of exactly what has happened, and that is woven into the world building itself. For Taya, the path seems clear, but inside these walls, festering beneath a growing dependency on cybernetic enhancements and camouflaged by the incessant noise of invasive ads and religious zealots, a radical cause, helmed by a mysterious witch, has taken root. As Taya struggles to determine which choices will bring her the answers she seeks, she begins to realize her world and everything she has been taught to believe may not be as it seems, because, you know, hero's journey with a twist. Radicalization is the path and trauma is what it is paved with. But I hope you don't mind this pitch for Neon Ghosts, A Witch's Sin. And if you're curious to back the Kickstarter, tinyurl.com/neonghosts, or if you just want to pre-order an ebook or audiobook, that, of course, will be linked down below as well. But in exciting news for my Mistborn fans, a fan-made Mistborn PC game has reportedly finally been finished. Titled Mistborn Beyond Ashes is a reality after a month and a half of development, and has been hard since there was a time limit and we were 2 people, but I am very satisfied with the result. Read the description, please, and give your opinions. Due to time constraints, I have not had time to playtest this, but the fact that there is someone out there and we're in a day and age of tech where just 2 people in a month and a half can launch some form of game for a book they love is really cool, and I just like covering fan stuff like this. Neat. It makes me feel happy in my body, and I don't get that all the time. But speaking of things that do make me feel things in my body, transitions, Poor Things, the upcoming movie from the same director as The Lobster, has had its first trailer, and it looked super weird, and I love that. Anything that seems like it's going to take the concepts and potential of sci-fi and fantasy and stretch them possibly in a direction I have not seen at least regularly before gets me excited. And the tone and weirdness of this trailer absolutely fits the bill. That's the expression I'm going for, right? But this unorthodox story about a woman brought back to life by a mad scientist played by Willem Dafoe and the woman by Emma Stone will be released September 8th of this year.
I'm gonna see it.
But Daniel, that didn't make my body feel good.
Fine. Then this might, because we are getting vinyl editions of all of the Ghibli soundtracks printed in color. That's right, colorful, interesting Ghibli vinyl. This is not the first time that Ghibli soundtracks have been in vinyl, but this collection is presenting them in a way that I feel like a lot of collectors will be interested in. You can pre-order them now, with them officially launching on June 23rd, though be wary of the price tag. I know vinyl can vary quite a bit, but these ones will range from $53.98 to $68.98. Now, the fantasy community, of course, has been watching the latest rollout for one of the largest IPs in the fantasy gaming space, Diablo 4. And many people, and this article included, have been wondering how bad the microtransactions will be and if the game overall will be pay to win. And this article, though it struck a somewhat optimistic tone, I failed to share it. Here are my full thoughts. Each item costs platinum, which is premium currency you can only acquire by outright purchasing it or unlocking it through the battle pass. God damn it. All things considered, nothing sets Diablo 4's microtransactions. It shouldn't have them. If you're paying $70 for a game, that should be it. It's not even 60. It's fucking 70. I don't want you to bloat out the game and add a bunch of shit to the menu that's constantly asking me to spend money on dumb skins. And here's the thing, I don't even care if it isn't pay to win. I don't care if it's purely aesthetics. I used to be more forgiving and say, well, if it's just aesthetics, who cares? You know, you can opt in, opt out. No, it's still gross. You don't get to sell me something and then continue to ask for money, which is what having that shop there, and I'm sure the pop-ups and stuff that'll be there, will be. And on top of that, Blizzard has zero trust, zero credibility. I don't care if things look good for now. I don't trust that in a few months or in a few years, or a year after release, the game won't suddenly be flooded with pay-to-win options. It's like, why would I trust this as far as I could throw your literal company's baggage. I'm not going to play this game because I'm not really desiring to play it to begin with, but on top of that, like, I just have absolutely no faith that they're not going to wait for a bunch of people to have invested a ton of time into characters they care about and then suddenly turn around and go, now you got to pay a whole bunch of money. Pay to win. It's great. Okay, we got it in there. Like, all I feel like is Blizzard is edging themselves on when they can finally bust the pay to win and even more expensive, crazy microtransactions all over our faces. So yeah, I'm good. No thanks. Bye-bye now. I am actually kind of excited to get into this next story because apparently we are getting an original idea from Zack Snyder titled Rebel Moon, described as Zack Snyder is world building once again with Rebel Moon. This time, the 300 and Justice League filmmaker is creating not just one world, but a sprawling menagerie of planets, full of cyborg warriors with molten metal swords, giant half-humanoid arachnids, and ancient robots that seem to have emerged more from medieval times than the future. The new Netflix space saga that Snyder directed and co-wrote extends far beyond the verdant orb of the title. That moon is actually one of the more modest worlds. It circles around an immense gas giant at a distant edge of the galaxy, and is populated mainly by farmers. It's nowhere special, but it's about to change the balance of power in this fictional universe. And this might surprise you to hear, as I've been on the record of not being the biggest fan of Zack Snyder. I think he makes fun movies and definitely nails certain visual vibes, but he's just not my personal favorite storyteller. This does excite me though. The idea of Zack Snyder tackling his own version of a Star Wars type story. I just love space opera, so why wouldn't I be excited to see someone who does striking visuals extremely well try and prove themselves in a new way with something they wrote and directed. And yeah, worst case scenario, it'll probably be some schlock where I can at least go, that's really pretty. And best case scenario, Zack Snyder is evolving his talents and trade as a director and is able to release something that isn't constrained by many of the stories he's tackled before narratively, and we can see what happens when Zack Snyder is really able to stretch his muscles, which I would like to see. Also, with the tragedy that struck that guy's family, which just still, as someone who's lost people close to me, rips my heart out, it's inspiring to see someone pick themselves up and get back to work after dealing with something so horrific. So Zack Snyder, respect for that, and I'll definitely be checking out this new Netflix duology that will apparently premiere in December of this year. Now, we don't know if Rebel Moon will be schlock or not. It falls into the schlock uncertainty principle, but something we know will be schlock just based on the trailer is going to be Resident Evil Death Island. And I know you might be thinking, Daniel, you've never really spoken on Resident Evil before. Why would you have an opinion on this? Because of this shot. I don't know.
Let's do it, all of us.
Oh my f***ing god, how stupid. That was my favorite thing I've ever seen. That was horrible cinematic brilliance, and I cannot wait to watch this one day not knowing anything about the larger story and just enjoying whatever this is. But just as fantasy news was wrapping up right after I shaved my beard, we got a batch of trailers dropped relating to the sci-fi fantasy genre, and while I certainly can't go over them all, the three that stood out to me were a new side-scroller Prince of Persia game that does actually look genuinely fun, and I am interested in, though I would like to see that game return to its original style of gameplay eventually. We also got the trailer for Return to Moria, a survival Moria game where you play as a dwarf that looks interesting, certainly has much more appeal than the Gollum game, at least in concept. And then finally we got the trailer for Witcher Season 3, our final season with Geralt, played by Henry Cavill, and it is going to be released in 2 volumes. Volume 1 on June 29th, and Volume 2 on July 27th. At least not doing them all at once, which is still something I'm just not personally a very big fan of. Though The Witcher show, it seems to be still getting some things certainly right in terms of beasts and creature design. Narratively, though, I am still just left wanting. But now, to finish off this episode of Fantasy News, I am very happy to show you some more books written by you all within the Goblin Horde. So without any further ado, the Fantasy News Self-Pub Promo segment. And for the indie authors featured this week in Fantasy News, first we're going to be starting off with Claudia Klein, who is bringing us the you guys are going to have to cut me some slack here, series, which is coming to a Kickstarter June 6th through the 19th. With a synopsis reading, get ready for royal rivalries, wizened wizards, siblings teaming up against sinister magic, and an unimaginable darkness rising. With covers that look A Song of Ice and Fire inspired. Next up, we have Gregory Contaxis, a self-pub author who's released his first book 3 weeks ago in a planned pentology. With the synopsis for the Dance of Light Book 1, The Return of the Knights, reading, the Palace of the Dawn will soon be stormed. The most ruthless man of all time is one step away from assailing on Lovebridge and dethroning Sophie Delamere. The Queen of Nightdorn is now alone, with neither allies nor an army capable of rebuffing the enemy, which is approaching her city. Everything appears to be over until a mysterious young man, Elliot, makes an appearance. Next up, we have The Dragon's Hide by Dustin Porta and DK Holmberg, and is in the current SPFBO contest. It follows a new assassin and his dragon to their first safe house, a cozy inn on the edge of an empire. They meet their mentor only to discover they're woefully unprepared. The spy network isn't what it used to be, and the safe house hides more and darker secrets. Next up, we have More Than a Vampire by J.R. Carroll. With a publisher's summary reading, In the Shadows of a Hidden World, the Turned live forever. Was the peace between the 4 clans in danger? His job for 200 years was to hunt rogue vampires. Simon did it well. His clan depended upon him, and keeping things in balance suited Simon. Everything changed in 1639. That's when he met Lena. And finally, we have the last book for today by Alex Robbins, author of the War of the 12 series, a fast-paced, action-driven fantasy. The 4th and final book came out last year, which means those of you looking for a completed series, this will be right up your alley. And on June 1st, a omnibus edition containing all 4 books, as well as the cover art and character portraits and some short stories, was released. And it'll be free on Kindle Unlimited. For those of you who want to have their own self-published books featured in Fantasy News, please do not send them to the email associated with the channel, and instead just join the Discord server, find the Self-Pub promo channel, and just give us your cover art and synopsis and name there. Thank you so much. Back to the news. But this has just been your latest episode of Fantasy News. Like and subscribe if you have not already. There was nothing there to slap, but I did it anyway. And have a good one, y'all. Post any fantasy news you would like to see covered in the appropriate Discord channel. And remember to stay happy and healthy. Bye! And of course, I'd like to record a special shout out to my latest high tier patrons: Joseph, Sean Thibidu, Lon Var Endor, and Donschnitt, and one that I think translates to point of view.